Subscribe for more thrilling Mafia romance stories and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part. New York never slept, but nights like this felt especially alive, breathing through neon lights and expensive music. From the private floor above the Valenti Club, Lorenzo Valenti stood behind the one-way glass, watching his kingdom move exactly as he had designed it. Power flowed through the building like electricity. Deals were made with a smile, threats delivered with a handshake, and loyalty was measured in silence. Everything here answered to him. Everything followed his rules. That control had kept him alive in a world where mistakes were fatal. "Sir, the documents for Friday's meeting are finalized," a calm voice said behind him. Lorenzo didn't turn. He recognized that voice anywhere. Maya Hartley. Efficient. Precise. Always steady. "Leave them on the desk," he said. "Yes, Mr. Valenti." She did as instructed, tablet tucked neatly under her arm. For 3 years, she had worked at his side, navigating a criminal empire with intelligence and discipline that impressed even his most hardened men. She never asked unnecessary questions, never showed fear, and never crossed professional lines. That distance was supposed to keep things simple. Lorenzo finally turned and looked at her. "You're done for the night." Maya nodded. "If you need anything else." "I don't." Their eyes met for a brief second. Something heavy passed between them, something neither acknowledged. Maya looked away first, professional as ever, and walked toward the elevator. The doors closed, and Lorenzo stared at his reflection in the glass longer than necessary. He told himself the tightness in his chest was exhaustion. Nothing more. An hour later, he descended to the main floor. The club was packed. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble, and the bass vibrated through the walls. People noticed when Lorenzo Valenti entered a room. Conversations softened. Shoulders straightened. Respect and fear followed him like shadows. Marco, his right-hand man, walked beside him, scanning faces and exits out of habit. That's when Lorenzo saw her. Maya stood near the bar, her back half turned, holding a drink she hadn't noticed. She wasn't in her usual tailored suit. She wore a deep blue dress that hugged her just enough to steal the breath from his lungs. Her hair was loose, soft around her shoulders, and she was laughing, openly, freely, in a way he had never seen. And she wasn't alone. A man stood close to her, leaning in as he spoke. Too close. Young, confident, dressed well enough to belong but not important enough to matter. His body language was easy, familiar. One hand rested on the bar near Maya's waist, casual, possessive in a way that made Lorenzo's jaw tighten. He stopped walking. "Who's the guy with her?" Lorenzo asked, his voice low. Marco followed his gaze. "That's Ethan Cole. Tech investor. Clean background. No ties to us." Lorenzo didn't look away. "And her?" Marco hesitated. "Your secretary, sir." "I know who she is," Lorenzo said sharply. Across the room, Maya laughed again, her head tilting slightly as Ethan said something that made her smile. She touched his arm briefly, a small, innocent gesture that felt like fire under Lorenzo's skin. Something dark stirred in his chest, hot, irrational jealousy. He didn't like it. He didn't recognize it. And he definitely didn't allow it. "She didn't mention plans tonight," Lorenzo said. "She doesn't have to," Marco replied carefully. "She's allowed a life." Lorenzo shot him a warning glance. Marco wisely said nothing more. As if sensing him, Maya looked up. Their eyes locked. The smile vanished from her face instantly. Her posture stiffened, and she stepped half a pace away from Ethan. The music seemed to fade as Lorenzo held her gaze, his expression unreadable but heavy with something dangerous. For a moment, the entire room ceased to exist. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked her. "Yes," Maya said quickly. "I just need some air." She walked toward the balcony without looking back. Lorenzo followed. The balcony doors closed behind them, muting the noise of the club. Cold air brushed against Maya's skin as she gripped the railing, her heartbeat loud in her ears. The city stretched endlessly below, glittering and indifferent. "You didn't say you were coming back here," Lorenzo said from behind her. She turned slowly. "I don't report my personal life to you. You're in my club." "I was invited," she replied evenly. "By a friend." His eyes narrowed. "Is that what he is?" "Yes." Lorenzo stepped closer, invading her space. He could smell her perfume, something subtle and unfamiliar. You should be careful who you associate with. Maya's eyes flashed. That's not your decision. Silence settled between them, thick and charged. For the first time, Lorenzo felt something slip, his control, his certainty. He exhaled slowly. You're right, he said. She looked surprised. But understand this, he continued, voice low and steady, the world you stand near isn't safe. And people connected to me attract attention. Her breath hitched. You're worried about me. His eyes darkened, revealing more than he intended. Go home, Maya, tonight. She searched his face, then nodded once and walked past him, leaving him alone with the city and a truth he could no longer ignore. For the first time in years, Lorenzo Valenti realized he wanted something he didn't own, and that realization terrified him. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of Lorenzo Valenti's penthouse, but it did nothing to soften his mood. He hadn't slept. The image of Maya standing at the bar, smiling at another man, replayed in his mind like a taunt. It wasn't anger that bothered him most, it was the loss of control. He had built his empire by mastering every variable, predicting every outcome. Maya was supposed to be simple. An employee. Efficient. Distant. Yet somehow she had become the one thing he couldn't calculate. Across the city, Maya sat at her kitchen table staring into a cup of untouched coffee. She hadn't slept either. The balcony confrontation echoed in her thoughts, his voice low, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. She told herself she was imagining the tension, that Lorenzo Valenti didn't feel things like jealousy or fear. Men like him didn't worry. They commanded. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone, half expecting a message that never came. By the time she arrived at the office, the Valenti building buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Security nodded as she passed, respect clear in their eyes. Maya had earned her place here, not through intimidation, but through competence. She organized meetings that kept dangerous men from killing each other. She managed schedules that balanced crime and legitimacy with surgical precision. Yet today, every step felt heavier. Good morning, Ms. Hartley, Marco said as she approached Lorenzo's office. Morning, she replied, forcing a calm smile. Is he in? Marco studied her for a moment. He is. And he's been asking for you. Her stomach tightened. I'll go in. Lorenzo stood by the window when she entered, jacket already on, phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call with a sharp tap and turned to face her. His expression was neutral, but the tension in his posture betrayed him. Close the door, he said. She did. The click echoed loudly. I need you to reschedule my afternoon, he said, pacing slowly. Cancel everything after 3. Yes, sir. And clear your evening. Maya looked up. Excuse me. There's a charity gala tonight. I need you there. That wasn't on my calendar. I'm adding it now. She hesitated. Is there a reason? His eyes met hers, intense and searching. It's safer. Her jaw tightened. Safer than dinner with a friend. Something flickered across his face. That man puts you at risk. You don't know him. I know enough. Silence stretched. Maya took a breath, steadying herself. With respect, Mr. Valenti, my personal life intersects with mine whether you like it or not, he cut in. The words hung heavy between them. Finally, he turned away. You're dismissed. The gala that evening was held in a historic Manhattan hotel, dripping with old money and polished smiles. Maya arrived beside Lorenzo in a sleek black car, her dress elegant but modest, her nerves hidden behind years of professionalism. Lorenzo's presence dominated the room instantly. Men greeted him with forced warmth, women watched him with open curiosity. He kept a hand lightly at Maya's back, a subtle claim that did not go unnoticed. She was acutely aware of it. As they moved through the crowd, Maya realized something unsettling. Lorenzo wasn't just protecting her, he was watching her. Every interaction, every smile exchanged. When a donor lingered too long in conversation, Lorenzo stepped in smoothly, possessive without being obvious. It made her pulse quicken in ways she didn't want to analyze. Relax, he murmured as they paused near the balcony. I'm not interrogating you. Could have fooled me, she replied quietly. A corner of his mouth lifted. You handle pressure well. Because I've had good training, she said, meeting his gaze. Their eyes locked, the air thick with unspoken meaning. For a moment, it felt like the club balcony all over again. Then Marco appeared, his expression serious. "Sir, we have a problem." Lorenzo's demeanor shifted instantly. "Talk." "Ethan Cole," Marco said, glancing briefly at Maya. "He's been asking questions. About you. About her." Maya's breath caught. "Ethan. He's not who he claims," Marco continued. "We're still digging." Lorenzo's eyes darkened as he looked at Maya. "I told you to be careful." She felt a surge of fear and anger. "If he's dangerous, that's not my fault." "No," Lorenzo said quietly. "It's mine." The drive back was silent. When they reached her apartment building, Lorenzo surprised her by stepping out of the car as well. "You don't need to walk me up," she said. "I know." Yet he followed her inside anyway. In the hallway outside her door, tension wrapped around them like a storm cloud. "You can't control who I see," she said softly. "I'm not trying to," he replied. "I'm trying to keep you alive." She searched his face, seeing something real beneath the power and violence. Concern. Fear. Something dangerously close to care. "Why me?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was low. "Because you matter." The words settled between them, heavy and undeniable. As Maya unlocked her door, she knew one thing with certainty. Whatever line existed between her and Lorenzo Valenti had already been crossed, and there was no turning back. The following days unfolded with an uneasy calm that felt more dangerous than chaos. Maya returned to work as usual, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every glance from Lorenzo lingered a second longer. Every instruction carried an undercurrent she couldn't ignore. He no longer pretended she was just another employee. And she no longer pretended she didn't feel it. The office, once a place of structure and safety, had become charged with tension that hummed beneath every interaction. Lorenzo buried himself in work, using meetings and phone calls as armor. But Maya's presence followed him everywhere. When she handed him files, he noticed the faint tremor in her fingers. When she spoke, he listened not just to her words, but to what she didn't say. He hated how deeply she had embedded herself into his thoughts. Attachment was a weakness he had cut out of his life long ago. Yet she had slipped past every defense without trying. Marco's investigation into Ethan Cole deepened, and the results were unsettling. The man wasn't Mafia, but he wasn't clean either. Private security contracts. Data collection firms with vague clients. A man who knew how to dig without getting dirty. That alone made him dangerous. Lorenzo ordered surveillance immediately, tightening security around Maya without telling her. He told himself it was precaution. He knew it was more. Maya sensed the shift before she understood it. A different car outside her apartment. Familiar faces appearing too often on her commute. She wasn't naive. She knew Lorenzo's world well enough to recognize protection when she saw it. It irritated her more than it comforted her. She had survived on her own long before she ever worked for him. Being watched made her feel trapped. One evening, she confronted him. "Your people are following me," she said, standing in his office long after everyone else had left. Lorenzo didn't deny it. "Yes. You don't get to decide that for me. I get to decide when someone is a threat. And who decides if you are?" She shot back. That stopped him. He studied her, really studied her, and something unreadable passed through his eyes. "I would never hurt you." "You already are," she said quietly. The honesty in her voice unsettled him more than anger ever could. "Then tell me how to stop," he replied. She hadn't expected that. "Trust me," she said after a moment. "Let me breathe." Reluctantly, Lorenzo agreed to reduce the visible security, though he doubled the unseen protection. It was the closest compromise he could make. Letting go completely was not an option. Not anymore. That same night, Ethan reached out to Maya again. A message asking to meet, apologetic, persistent. She stared at her phone for a long time before responding. Curiosity warred with caution. She didn't believe he was dangerous, but doubt had been planted. In the end, she agreed to a public meeting, during daylight, on her terms. She didn't tell Lorenzo. The cafe was busy, filled with students and professionals, ordinary people living ordinary lives. Ethan arrived late, his smile a little tighter than she remembered. Their conversation was polite at first, but quickly shifted. His questions were subtle, wrapped in charm, but Maya noticed the pattern. Too much interest in her work. Too many casual mentions of Lorenzo Valenti. Her instincts flared. "Why are you really here, Ethan?" she asked. He leaned back, studying her. "You're smarter than I thought." Her heart pounded. "Answer the question." "I collect information," he said calmly. "And you're close to something valuable." She stood immediately. This was a mistake. As she turned to leave, his voice dropped. "Be careful who you trust, Maya. Men like Valenti don't protect. They possess." She walked out without responding, pulse racing. By the time she reached the street, a familiar black car rolled up beside her. The door opened. "Get in," Lorenzo said. She froze. "You followed me. I told you he was a problem." Inside the car, the silence was suffocating. Maya crossed her arms. "You don't own me." "No," Lorenzo replied, voice tight. "But he was probing you. That makes this my concern. You could have warned me instead of spying." "I did warn you." She laughed bitterly. "You warned me like a king warns his property." The words hit hard. Lorenzo looked away briefly before meeting her gaze again. "I don't see you as property. Then stop treating me like it." They arrived at her building, but neither moved to get out. The city hummed around them, unaware of the war happening inside that car. "I don't know how to do this," Lorenzo admitted quietly. "I don't know how to care without controlling." Maya's anger softened, replaced by something more dangerous, understanding. "Then learn," she said. "Or let me go." He reached for her hand, then stopped himself inches away, a rare show of restraint. "I can't let you go." Her breath caught. "Then don't cage me." They sat there, suspended between want and fear, power and vulnerability. Both knew that whatever this was, it had already gone too far to undo. As Maya stepped out of the car, she felt it clearly now. She was standing at the edge of a world she had helped run from the shadows, and at the edge of a man who could either protect her or destroy her. And for the first time, she wasn't sure which frightened her more. The days that followed were thick with unspoken tension, the kind that wrapped itself around every look and every breath. Lorenzo tried to return to discipline, to rules, to the cold clarity that had always guided him. But Maya was everywhere, in the cadence of his thoughts, in the pause before every decision. He found himself watching the door to his office more than his screens, listening for her footsteps without meaning to. Control had always been his greatest weapon, and now it was slipping through his fingers like smoke. Maya, meanwhile, threw herself into work with renewed determination. If she kept things professional enough, maybe she could restore the balance they'd lost. She handled schedules, mediated disputes, and smoothed negotiations with the same calm precision she always had. But even she couldn't ignore the way Lorenzo's presence affected her. When he stood too close, her pulse quickened. When his voice dropped into that low, dangerous register, her thoughts scattered. She hated the vulnerability of it, hated that he could undo her with a look. The fragile calm shattered one afternoon when Marco burst into Lorenzo's office without knocking. "We have confirmation," he said. "Ethan Cole isn't just collecting information. He's selling it. To a rival syndicate." Lorenzo's expression hardened instantly. "How close?" "Too close," Marco replied. "And Maya is the access point he was counting on." Lorenzo was on his feet before Marco finished speaking. The world narrowed to one singular purpose. Protect her. Whatever it took. Maya was in the conference room when Lorenzo entered, his energy dark and urgent. She looked up, immediately sensing something was wrong. "What happened?" "We're leaving," he said. "Now." "Lorenzo, I'm in the middle of. This isn't a discussion." Her temper flared. "You don't get to drag me out like this." He stopped inches from her, eyes blazing. "Ethan sold information. You're a liability to people who don't care if you live or die." The words landed like a blow. "You think I'd betray you?" "No," he said sharply. "I think he'd use you." The room felt too small, the air too tight. Finally, Maya grabbed her coat. "Fine. But don't mistake my cooperation for obedience." They drove in silence to a secure property outside the city, a place Lorenzo used only when things went bad. It was quiet, isolated, surrounded by trees and guarded by men who didn't ask questions. The moment they stepped inside, the weight of the situation settled over them. "You're staying here," Lorenzo said. Until this is finished. Maya crossed her arms. And what about my life? You'll have it back, he replied. I promise. She laughed softly, without humor. You make promises like a man who always gets his way. He turned to her, the distance between them charged. I don't want to get my way, he said. I want you safe. And what if I don't want to be hidden? She asked. What if I don't want to live in fear? His voice dropped. Then you shouldn't be anywhere near me. The truth in that statement hung heavy between them. Maya felt it settle into her chest, painful and undeniable. She had known from the beginning that working for Lorenzo Valenti came with risks. What she hadn't anticipated was how deeply entangled she would become. That night, sleep refused to come. Maya wandered the quiet house, finally stepping out onto the terrace. The stars were sharp and bright, the world deceptively peaceful. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning who it was. You should rest, Lorenzo said. So should you. They stood side by side, not touching, yet painfully aware of each other. When this is over, she said softly, what happens to us? He didn't answer right away. I don't plan futures, he said finally. They don't survive in my world. That's not an answer. He turned to her then, really turned, the mask slipping just enough. If I let myself want you, he said, it will cost you everything. Her heart ached at the honesty in his voice. You don't get to decide that alone. Before he could respond, Marco's voice crackled over Lorenzo's phone. We have movement. Ethan knows Maya's gone. He's panicking. Lorenzo straightened instantly, the king returning. And it, he said. Maya watched him, fear and admiration twisting together. This was the man who ruled shadows, who made impossible decisions look effortless. And somehow, impossibly, he cared for her. Hours later, as dawn broke, Marco called again. It's done. He won't be a problem. Relief washed through the room, but it was quickly replaced by something heavier. Consequences. Choices. Lorenzo turned to Maya. You can go back tomorrow, he said. If you want. She studied him, searching for the truth beneath his words. And if I stay? His gaze softened, just slightly. Then things will never be simple again. Maya took a slow breath. She knew then that there was no version of her life where Lorenzo Valenti didn't leave a mark. Whether she walked away or stepped closer, the cost would be real. As the sun rose higher, painting the world gold, Maya made her choice, not with certainty, but with courage. And Lorenzo, watching her, realized that the most dangerous gamble he'd ever taken wasn't power or territory. It was letting himself care. Morning arrived quietly, almost mockingly calm, as if the world hadn't tilted on its axis overnight. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the safe house, casting long shadows across the floor. Maya stood near the window, watching dust dance in the light, her mind replaying every word Lorenzo had said before dawn. You can go back tomorrow. If you want. The choice sounded simple, but she knew better. Nothing involving Lorenzo Valenti was ever simple. Lorenzo watched her from across the room, saying nothing. He had learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than commands. Yet this silence felt different. Fragile. Exposed. He had removed threats before, erased problems without hesitation, but this time there was no victory in it. Ethan was gone, yes, but the truth Ethan had spoken still lingered like a bruise. You don't protect. You possess. Lorenzo hated that the words had power because part of him feared they were true. I'm going back to work, Maya finally said, breaking the quiet. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched at her sides. Lorenzo nodded once. I'll have a car take you. I don't need an escort. You do, he replied calmly. For now. She sighed, but didn't argue. Some battles weren't worth fighting, not yet. The drive back into the city was tense but uneventful. When they reached the Valenti building, Maya hesitated before getting out of the car. Lorenzo, she said softly. He leaned closer. Yes. If this is going to continue, whatever this is, you need to start telling me the truth. He held her gaze. You won't like it. I already don't, she replied. But I deserve it. He didn't promise anything. That worried her more than a lie would have. Back inside the office, the familiar rhythm of work settled around Maya like armor. Phones rang. Assistants moved briskly through hallways. Meetings resumed. From the outside, nothing had changed. But beneath the surface, everything had. Maya noticed how the staff watched her now, subtle glances filled with curiosity and speculation. They sensed the shift even if they didn't understand it. That afternoon, Lorenzo called her into his office. The door closed behind her with a decisive click. "Sit," he said. She did, but only just. "You said you'd tell me the truth." He leaned against his desk, arms crossed. Ethan wasn't working alone. He was testing access points. "You were the cleanest one. And now they know better," Lorenzo said. "But they also know you matter to me." The word sent a chill through her. "That makes me a target." "Yes." She swallowed. "Then why keep me close?" "Because distance won't save you," he replied. "Visibility might." Maya stood abruptly. "So I'm a shield now?" "No," he said sharply. "You're the reason." The intensity in his voice stopped her. He took a step closer, lowering his tone. "I won't pretend this is safe. I won't promise you peace. But I will promise honesty, from now on." She searched his face, weighing the risk. "Then start with this," she said. "What do you want from me?" The question hung between them, dangerous and intimate. Lorenzo exhaled slowly. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not because I own you. Because you choose to." Her heart pounded. "And if I choose not to?" His jaw tightened. "Then I'll let you walk away." She didn't believe him. Not completely. But she believed he wanted to. That evening, the threat became real again. Marco interrupted a meeting with urgency etched into his face. "We intercepted a message," he said. "Someone's making a move. Tonight." Lorenzo's attention snapped to Maya. "You're not leaving the building." "I'm not hiding," she replied. "This isn't hiding," he said. "This is surviving." The building went into lockdown mode discreetly. Security doubled. Exits were monitored. Maya remained in Lorenzo's office as night fell, tension tightening with every passing minute. She paced while he stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear, issuing calm, lethal instructions. Finally, a shot rang out somewhere below. Maya froze. Lorenzo moved instantly, positioning himself in front of her without thinking. The sound echoed again, then silence. Moments later, Marco's voice came through the comms. "It's contained. Warning shot. No casualties." Maya's breath came out shaky. She hadn't realized how close danger had crept until it brushed her skin. Lorenzo turned to her, eyes dark, scanning her as if to confirm she was real, alive. "This is what my world does," he said quietly. "It comes for what I care about." She met his gaze, fear and resolve colliding inside her. "Then stop pushing me away when it does." For a long moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, carefully, Lorenzo reached out and rested his hand over hers. It wasn't possessive. It wasn't commanding. It was tentative, almost unsure. "I don't know how to love without breaking things," he admitted. Maya squeezed his hand. "Then learn," she said again. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, unaware of the fragile alliance forming in the shadows. Inside that office, two people stood at the edge of something dangerous, not just violence or power, but truth. And both of them knew now that the greatest risk wasn't the enemies watching from afar. It was what they were becoming to each other. The night city hummed below the Valenti building, a web of lights and shadows that seemed to mirror the tension inside Lorenzo Valenti's office. Ever since the Ethan Cole incident, nothing had been simple between him and Maya. They worked together, moved through the routines of the empire, yet every glance, every word, carried an undercurrent neither could ignore. It was dangerous, intoxicating, and unrelenting. Lorenzo had learned to control everything in his life, but her presence had become a variable he couldn't dominate. Maya sat at her desk, reviewing contracts for a new legitimate venture Lorenzo was funding, trying to focus. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the earlier moments of the day, the way Lorenzo had looked at her when a client flirted shamelessly with her, the barely restrained tension in his posture, the subtle way he had adjusted her chair without asking. It was infuriating and exhilarating all at once. She hated how much she cared, and yet, she could not deny it. "Ms. Hartley," Marco's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Security update. Everything is quiet so far." "Thank you, Marco," she replied, forcing her tone to remain neutral. He left, and she exhaled slowly. The quiet didn't feel safe anymore. Lorenzo's world had a way of turning even mundane calm into danger at the drop of a hat. That was part of why she couldn't let herself lean too close to him. Leaning too close meant exposure, vulnerability, and potentially death. Lorenzo watched her from across the office. He had been standing there for minutes, pretending to check emails, but his eyes were fixed. Every time she bent over a file or reached for a pen, he noticed it. The tension of control warred with his growing desire. He knew this was foolish. He couldn't allow himself to be distracted by an employee, even one who had changed everything inside him. And yet, here he was, breaking every rule he had ever lived by. "Maya," he said finally, moving closer. "You're overworking yourself again." "I'm fine," she replied, not looking up. "Sit down," he said, firm but calm. "I'll make you a promise. If you collapse from exhaustion, I will never forgive myself." She chuckled softly, shaking her head. "You take control of everything, don't you?" "Not everything," he said, standing beside her chair. "Some things, most dangerous things, I don't yet know how to handle." Her gaze flicked up at him. "And me." He swallowed, a rare uncertainty flickering across his features. "Most dangerous of all." Her pulse quickened. She didn't answer. There was nothing to say. He had just admitted something that should have scared her, and yet, she felt a strange thrill instead. It was maddening. The calm of the office shattered when Lorenzo's phone buzzed. He answered quickly, eyes narrowing. "Marco," he barked. The conversation was short but tense. A rival faction had moved closer, testing the edges of Lorenzo's control, probing for weaknesses. "I'll handle it," he said before hanging up. Maya's brow furrowed. "Another threat." "Yes," he said simply. "And this one isn't far away." Her stomach tightened. "So, we're not just dealing with Ethan anymore." "No," he said, pacing now, his mind clearly calculating, plotting. Ethan was a warning. This is the storm. She felt fear, but also the pull toward him, toward the man who always seemed untouchable yet stood exposed before her in ways no one else had ever seen. "What do we do? We survive," he said, his tone flat but deadly. "And we protect what matters." Maya's breath hitched. "You mean me?" His gaze locked onto hers. "Yes," he admitted quietly. There it was again, the confession that neither could ignore. It was dangerous, reckless, and utterly consuming. She wanted to argue, to assert herself, to maintain some semblance of independence. But words failed her. She only nodded, her lips slightly parted, heart hammering against her ribs. Lorenzo stepped closer, closing the space between them. The air seemed to vibrate with energy, every heartbeat louder than the bass of the city outside. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked, low and deliberate. "Being close to me, in this life, it isn't a choice anymore. It's survival. And it's personal." "I understand," she whispered, barely audible. He tilted his head, searching her face for hesitation, for doubt. Finding none, his hand brushed against hers, not possessive, but charged with intent. "If anything happens to you, Maya, I won't forgive myself," he said. Her pulse raced. "Then don't let anything happen," she replied, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Lorenzo's eyes darkened, a dangerous fire igniting. "I won't," he said simply. But the words felt heavier than a promise, they were a declaration. Hours passed with preparation. Security doubled, safe rooms readied, plans laid for every possible contingency. Maya stayed close to Lorenzo, watching him move through the room with lethal precision, a predator among prey. And yet, between them, there was a new tension, something that went beyond strategy or duty. Desire, raw and unspoken, hovered in the air. When night fell, Lorenzo finally broke the silence. "Stay close to me tonight," he said. "I will," she replied. "You don't understand," he said, lowering his voice. "This isn't just for show. Your life is my responsibility now. My failure isn't an option." She nodded, heart heavy with fear and anticipation. "Then I'll stay alive. For both of us." Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to the storm gathering in the shadows. Inside, two people stood at the edge of danger, tangled in the delicate threads of control, desire, and trust. Neither of them knew where the night would lead, only that it had already changed them forever. Hours later, when Lorenzo finally allowed her a moment alone, Maya reflected on the dangerous truth she now lived with. Working for Lorenzo Valenti was no longer a matter of professional duty. It was a risk, a challenge, and something far more intoxicating than she had ever imagined. She could feel it in her chest, heavy and constant, the pull toward him. Toward the man whose control had shaped empires and whose heart, she suspected, was slowly being claimed by her presence. And Lorenzo, standing in the shadows outside her door, felt it too. The cost of wanting her was no longer theoretical, it was real, urgent, and unavoidable. He could fight it, deny it, and try to maintain the cold control that had kept him alive for decades. But every time she smiled, every time she breathed near him, he lost a little more of himself. And he didn't care, because he knew now, without question, that losing her would be a price too high to pay. The city hummed outside, indifferent. But inside the walls of the Valenti building, two people had crossed lines they could never uncross, pulled into a dangerous orbit from which there was no escape. And both of them were already changed. Anticipation, the kind of heat that pressed against skin and made every movement feel sharper, heavier. Lorenzo Valenti's office was quiet, deceptively calm, but beneath the surface, tension hummed like a live wire. Maya sat near the window, reviewing files with meticulous care, but the calm was only an appearance. She could feel Lorenzo's presence behind her, heavy, unwavering, impossible to ignore. Every time she shifted, he shifted. Every sigh she let escape her lips seemed to draw him closer, closer to breaking the delicate barrier that neither had dared to cross fully. "Why are you still here?" she asked without looking up, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. "Because the night isn't over," he said, moving closer until she could feel the heat radiating from him. "And neither are we," she swallowed, glancing up finally, and caught the intensity in his eyes. It was not just concern or command, it was something more dangerous, something primal. "You can't keep hovering over me," she said, trying to maintain control. "I'm not a child." "I know," he replied softly, but his voice carried a weight that made her heart flutter. "You're not. But the world I live in, it doesn't care about who you are. Only that you matter to me." Maya's breath caught at the words. The city outside was alive, but inside, the air was charged with something she had no words for, a mixture of danger, desire, and unspoken confession. She wanted to step back, to remind herself that this was professional, that she had a life outside of his shadow. But every fiber of her being resisted. "Lorenzo," she said quietly, "you can't keep trying to control everything. Not me, not this." "I'm not trying to control you," he said, taking a step closer, closing the space between them. "I'm trying to protect you." She shook her head slightly. "Protection isn't possession." "I don't know the difference anymore," he admitted, voice low, rough around the edges. "All I know is that I can't stand the thought of anyone touching you, talking to you, or even looking at you the way that man did." Maya's pulse quickened. She had expected control, intimidation, even jealousy, but not this raw vulnerability. Not this confession disguised as anger. Her lips parted slightly, words failing her for the first time in what felt like forever. "I'm not his," she whispered. "I know," he said immediately, softer now, almost tender. "You're yours. And I don't know how to be with that. How to want someone without fear, without risking everything." The tension between them shifted, pulling tighter, like a wire stretched to the breaking point. Lorenzo's eyes darkened with something that wasn't just desire, it was fear, possessiveness, and longing all wrapped together. Maya could feel it, and she realized that this man, this formidable, untouchable king of an empire, was falling in ways he had never allowed himself before. They moved closer without thinking, two forces pulled by gravity neither wanted to name. Lorenzo's hand brushed against hers, tentative at first, testing, seeking permission. Maya didn't pull away. Instead, she let the contact linger, the simple touch carrying more weight than either had expected. "You're playing with fire," she said, voice trembling, but there was a thrill beneath her fear. "I know," he admitted, leaning slightly closer. "And I don't care." Their proximity was dangerous. Every instinct screamed at them to stop, to step back, to preserve the fragile boundaries that had kept them safe. But every heartbeat, every quickened breath, threatened to destroy those boundaries completely. Lorenzo's hand moved, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and the world outside ceased to exist. There was only him, her, and the tension that had been building for days. "You're reckless," she whispered. "And you're tempting me," he countered, voice dropping lower, rougher, urgent. "Every second you sit here, every glance, every word, it's a challenge I can't refuse." Maya's chest tightened, her mind screaming both to resist and to surrender. This was the line they had danced around for days, the edge of a cliff neither dared to step off, and yet, here they were, teetering dangerously close. "I can't," she began, then stopped. Words failed her. Desire tangled with fear, creating a storm she didn't want to calm. "I know," he whispered, closing the last distance between them. "I know you can't, and I can't either." And yet, his lips hovered near hers, a breath away, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. The entire office seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the two of them suspended in a dangerous, irresistible orbit. Every instinct screamed to pull back, to maintain control, but none of it mattered anymore. Maya's hand found his, gripping it tightly. "Lorenzo," she breathed, the name almost a plea. "Yes," he said, voice raw, carrying the weight of everything he had refused to admit. "I can't stop thinking about you. Not for a second. And I don't want to." The pull between them was undeniable, their bodies drawn together by forces neither could fully name. She leaned forward, just enough to feel the heat of his chest, the sharp edge of danger mingling with the pull of desire. And then, the moment shattered, Marco's voice crackled over Lorenzo's phone. "Sir, we have a situation," Marco said, urgent and clipped. "Someone's trying to breach the east perimeter. Now." Lorenzo cursed under his breath, his focus snapping to the threat, and the moment with Maya shattered completely. He tore his hand away from hers, taking a step back, the human part of him warring with the man he had trained to control every situation. "Go to the safe room," he commanded, eyes dark. "Now." Maya hesitated, fear and frustration mingling. "I'm not hiding from you." "You're not hiding," he said sharply. "You're surviving. This isn't about courage. It's about living." With that, she followed him, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The safe room was secure, hidden behind layers of reinforced walls, cameras, and surveillance that even the most skilled intruders would struggle to breach. Lorenzo stood in front of her as the security systems locked down, the lines between protector and predator blurred, dangerous and magnetic. "You can't fight this world alone," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I can't let you. I don't want to be protected like a prize," she said, voice steady despite the fear. "I want to be respected." "I do respect you," he said, voice low and sincere. "But I can't help wanting more." They stood there, inches apart, breathing in sync, the hum of the city outside replaced by the charged silence of the room. For a moment, the threat outside was irrelevant. Nothing existed but them, the danger, and the undeniable pull that had drawn them together for days. And in that moment, both understood the truth they had been denying. They were no longer just employee and employer, secretary and mafia king. They were something more dangerous, more consuming, and far more irreversible. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, threats, desire, fear, and longing intertwined, each feeding the other. And both of them knew that crossing this line, allowing themselves to feel, was a gamble that could destroy everything, or finally let them live fully for the first time. Because in Lorenzo Valenti's world, survival was the only certainty. And Maya Hartley had become both the risk and the reason he was willing to gamble everything. The city slept uneasily beneath the steel and glass towers, oblivious to the storm raging within Lorenzo Valenti's empire. The past days had pushed Maya and Lorenzo to the edge of danger and desire, blurring lines that neither could afford to cross. The safe room had become their temporary world, a cage built of walls, cameras, and security protocols, but it was also a crucible that forced honesty, fear, and longing into the open. Both had spent nights awake, calculating, watching, and feeling more than either wanted to admit. Now, it was time to face the consequences. Morning arrived muted, sunlight filtering through the blinds like cautious fingers. Maya sat on the edge of the bed in the safe room, sipping coffee, trying to regain a sense of control that seemed impossible to hold. Lorenzo was silent, leaning against the wall with arms crossed, eyes dark and unreadable. For a moment, the world outside didn't matter. Their reality was compressed into the tension between them, the shared knowledge that their lives were intertwined more than they had ever expected. "Are you going to tell me the plan for today?" Maya asked finally, breaking the silence. Lorenzo's gaze didn't waver. "The plan is simple: survive, protect, and move fast." But first, his eyes softened slightly, and she noticed the rare vulnerability he allowed himself to show. "You should know something. What's coming today, it's serious. This isn't just a rival faction testing boundaries. They want leverage. They want you." Her stomach dropped. "Me? Yes," he said. "Because you're not just my secretary. You're important. To me. And to them, that makes you valuable." Maya's heart raced. She had trained herself to handle risk, to manage threats. But this was different. This was personal, and it hit closer than any negotiation, any calculated danger she had ever faced. "We'll get through this," Lorenzo said, stepping closer, his voice low and deliberate. "I promise you that. But you need to trust me. And you need to trust yourself." She nodded, knowing both statements were true, even if her chest felt heavy with fear. "I trust you," she said quietly. "But I'm not fragile. You don't get to treat me like I am." "I know," he said. I can't risk losing you." The weight of that admission hit her in a way nothing else had. The powerful, untouchable Mafia king was exposing himself in front of her, revealing not a strategy or a plan, but his heart, fragile and fiercely attached. Maya felt a mix of fear, longing, and clarity. This was no longer about professional boundaries. It was about survival and surrender in ways neither could deny. By mid-morning, the Valenti security network had traced the threat to a warehouse near the East River. Lorenzo and Marco moved with precision, cameras feeding live images, phones ready, weapons silent but deadly. Maya insisted on coming, despite Lorenzo's objections. "I can handle myself," she said firmly. "I'm not a liability." "You're not a liability," Lorenzo replied, voice tight. "But if anything happens, I won't forgive myself." She met his eyes, silent acknowledgement passing between them. They were partners in a war no one else could see, bound by stakes higher than either had imagined. The warehouse loomed ahead, industrial and unassuming, but Lorenzo could feel the tension coiling inside like a predator waiting to strike. They entered carefully, Maya close behind, heart racing in sync with the muted thrum of the city beyond. Shadows danced across metal crates, and every footstep echoed, a reminder of the danger lurking in the corners. Suddenly, a figure stepped into the dim light, Ethan Cole, or someone working under his influence. The moment stretched, danger and anticipation crashing into each other. "Looking for me," the man sneered. "You're not worth the trouble," Lorenzo said coldly. "But she is." The words hit Maya in a way she hadn't expected. She felt exposed, yet also fiercely defended. Her pulse accelerated, not from fear, but from the awareness that Lorenzo's attention, his loyalty, his desire, were entirely hers in that moment. A tense standoff ensued. Shots rang out, low and controlled, aimed at securing the perimeter without unnecessary risk. Marco moved with precision, covering them, while Lorenzo advanced toward the figure blocking the exit. Maya remained alert, her instincts sharp, ready to react, her fear mingling with adrenaline. In the chaos, Lorenzo grabbed her hand, anchoring her. "Stay close," he said. "No sudden moves." "I'm right here," she replied, gripping his hand tightly. The confrontation was swift. Lorenzo neutralized the threat with lethal efficiency, the enemy incapacitated before harm could come to Maya. When the dust settled, the warehouse was silent except for their breathing. Lorenzo finally released her hand, stepping back, surveying her with a mixture of relief and something deeper, more intense. "You're safe," he said quietly. "For now." Maya exhaled, adrenaline giving way to an overwhelming rush of emotion. "Thanks," she whispered. He moved closer, unrelenting, eyes dark and unreadable. "I can't lose you," he admitted. "Not to them, not to anyone." Her chest tightened. She understood now that the danger wasn't just physical, it was the pull between them, the desire neither could resist. She reached up, fingers brushing against his cheek. "Then don't let me go," she said softly. Lorenzo's lips hovered near hers, tense, hesitant, yet drawn by something inevitable. The city outside seemed to vanish, leaving only them, the storm of danger and desire entwined around them like fire. He closed the gap, pressing his lips to hers with a careful intensity that carried all the weight of the days they had endured, the threats, the fear, the jealousy, and the undeniable need. Time seemed to stretch and collapse at once. The kiss was neither gentle nor soft, it was claiming, desperate, a declaration of what words could never fully express. Maya responded with equal intensity, letting herself be pulled into the orbit of a man whose world was darkness, danger, and power, but who, in this moment, existed only for her. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything," he whispered. "Yes," she said softly, voice shaky with relief and desire. "And I don't regret it." The sun rose over the city as they left the warehouse, walking side by side, hands brushing, hearts still racing. The world hadn't changed, but they had. The danger remained, but the bond between them was undeniable, unbreakable. They had faced threats, fear, and desire, and they had survived, not just physically, but together. For Lorenzo Valenti, controlling empires was easy. Controlling desire was impossible. For Maya Hartley, surviving in a man's world had been her skill. Loving a man like Lorenzo Valenti was a risk, but one she was finally willing to take. And as they disappeared into the streets of New York, the city buzzing around them, both understood the truth: the greatest battles were not fought with weapons or strategy. They were fought with trust, with courage, and with hearts brave enough to embrace what they wanted, even when the world threatened to destroy it. Together, they had crossed the line. Together, they would face whatever came next.